Welcome to part 3 of the Teaching Computer Science to Key Stage 1 webinars. In this webinar, we're going to look specifically at the free code aspects of the tool to code. In the first webinar, we looked at the tool to go. In the second webinar, we looked at the tool to code and how to use the guided lessons and additional resources, including the lesson plans, in our computing scheme of work to support the teaching and learning of computer science in Key Stage 1. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing specifically on these two tools here, Free Code Scenes and Free Code Chimp. Now, before I go into Free Code Scenes and Free Code Chimp itself, I'm going to go back to the lesson plans. Here is Unit 1.7, which is for Year 1 children, and it's the coding unit using the tool to code. If I scroll down to Lesson 5, Setting the Scene, this particular lesson uses this tool here called Free Code Scenes, and you could, in advance of this lesson, set this as a to-do for your class. So the first thing I would need to do is come into to code here, go down to the free code area, and I would set Free Code Scenes as a to-do for my class. Now, if I go into Free Code Scenes again and launch the app this time, let's have a look at what this looks like. In Free Code Scenes, you have 4 different scenes that have already been pre-made for you. The children can then choose which of these scenes they want to code. You've got a space scene, flowers and fairies, sky high code, or spooky code. I'm going to go into the flowers and fairies code. Now you'll notice down the left hand side we have our output, control, event options, code blocks on the left hand side, and we also have our objects in this scene. Let me click on the design button on the right hand side, and that will take me to my scene, and I can see very clearly I have 5 objects on here. I have a bumblebee, 3 different fairies, fairy 3, fairy 2, fairy 1, and a ladybird. I also have other objects on the left hand side that I can drag onto my scene to add to my scene if I want to. Let's add a 4th fairy. When I click on an object on my design, I get this property value box that pops up on the left hand side. These property values determine the initial state of this particular object when I press play and run my code. So this particular object is a fairy. Its name is My Fairy 1, and I can change that there. Let's call it Sarah. There we go. Its movement when I press play is stopped. So when I press the play button, that fairy there is not going to move anywhere. If I change that, click on that fairy again, let's click on Sarah. If I change her movement to right, for example, and if I now press play, her initial state is moving right. So she is moving right by default. And now she's not going to come back on because I have set that particular property value, allow off screen, to yes. Now, if I change that back to a no and run it again, off she goes. When she leaves the scene, she's going to come back on the other side of the scene there. So I've set her initial property value there to not allow her off the screen. Now I can increase her size or decrease her size here using the scale property value. And I can change what she looks like by clicking on this image button here in this image property. Let's click on that. And it will take me to my clip art picker. And there are hundreds of different objects that I could choose here to select to make her look like something else. So let's perhaps have, let's have a genie. All right, well, I better change her name now and call her Jeannie. Now, the last property value in this selection here is whether at the beginning of the program she is shown on the screen or whether she is hidden. And if I select the hidden, if I then press play, she is there on the scene, but she's hidden initially. So let's press stop. Let's go back and make her show again. So I've now got 6 objects on my screen, and I'm ready to start programming those objects. The lesson plans and the slideshows that go along with these lesson plans will guide you through how to use free code scenes backgrounds. Here is the slideshow that goes along with lesson 5, and it encourages the children to think about what their scene could be, discuss their scene with a partner, and it starts them out by using free code scenes. Once your children have chosen one of these 4 options in free code scenes, they can then decide what the initial state is of the objects on their screen, drag some new objects on there, and they can manipulate the property values on the left hand side here. Lesson 6 encourages your children to start planning in a bit more detail what is going to happen in their scenes, what are the objects going to do, how are they going to interact with each other, and what is the story they're going to tell using this particular code. Again, here is the slideshow that goes along with lesson 6. We review the scene design that they already saved in the last lesson 5, and then we go into a bit more of a planning idea planning what they want their objects to do, how they want them to move, and what's the sequence of events that's going to happen in their code. Then, once your children have completed the plan of their program, they can use the code blocks in the code window to actually apply that program plan into the code itself. So here is my scene all set. If I exit my design and go to my code window, you'll see very clearly the output options, the control options here, and the events that I've learnt, and here are my objects that are on my scene. So I'm now going to program my scene to match the plan that I've created. I want my bumblebee to move around the scene up, down, left and right, and I want to use the key press event. So if I drag this when key event into the code window and then I press the up arrow on my keyboard, I can then make the bee move. So if I drag the bee object into that command, I'm given 9 different options. I'm going to choose the up action. So if I press play, my genie is automatically moving right, which I set in the property values. And if I use my up arrow, my bumblebee is now moving up. Now, so far, that's all he's going to do. Let's program his other actions. So now I have programmed 5 key press events for my bumblebee to make it move around the screen up, down, right, left, and I'm using the space bar to stop it moving. So if I press play, I can then move my bumblebee around by pressing on the different arrows on my keyboard. And if I want him to stop, I use the space bar. Now I want to program what's going to happen when my bumblebee runs into or collides with some of the other objects on the screen. So I'm going to use a collision detection here. So when the bumblebee collides with fairy number 1, I am going to make fairy number 1 disappear. When the bee collides with fairy number 2, I am going to make fairy 2 do something. Let's drag fairy 2 object into there. Now I want fairy 2 to actually turn into a different image. So I'm going to click on that image there and the question mark, and I'm going to change fairy 2 into a rabbit. And lastly, the last one, when bumblebee, let's drop this down the bottom, when the bee collides with fairy 3, I want fairy 3 to do something. She is going to speak and she's going to say, ouch, that hurt. Now, what I want to do is actually have a voiceover. Now, I'm going to use the sound output option up the top left here and drag that into the code window. So when the bee collides with fairy 3, a speech bubble will pop up saying, ouch, that hurt, and I'm going to play a sound. Now I can click on this question mark here to open up my sound picker, and there are dozens of pre-made sounds, or I can use my record button at the bottom, which will access the microphone on my device to record myself saying, ouch, that hurt. Here we go. Ouch, that hurt. Now let's play my code so far and see what happens. If I press play, my genie's moving to the right. My bumblebee's not going to move until I use my arrows. Here we go. I'll move him around and ouch, ouch, that hurt. Right, let's see what happens when he hits fairy number 2. Oh, that's fairy 1 disappears. Fairy 2 turns into a rabbit. Now I haven't got any code that will make anything happen when the bumblebee collides with the ladybird, and nothing happens when she collides with the genie. So I've programmed a collision detection event here. When the bee collides with the ladybird is going to turn into a different image. So let's click on that question mark. Now, one of the categories of the clip art picker here that children love is this splats category. So I'm going to use one of these. I'm going to use that green splat. So when the bee collides with the ladybird is going to go splat. I might need a splat sound there as well. Let's drag that sound and nest that in as part of that command. And let's have a splat sound. There we go. Right, let's try that. Let's see what happens when the when the bumblebee collides with the ladybird. Oh, there we go. Now, I think I've done an amazing piece of code. There's quite a lot happening in my code. I'm going to save that, and I'm now going to use the share option. Go to my drop-down menu and click the share button. I want to be able to share this with my friends in my class so they can play my code. So I'm going to click on this option here, which is the display board. So at the end of all the lesson plans in Appendix 1, there is a guide document on how to set up your own display board for your class and how children can share their work to that class display board. Let's go up to the sharing tab, go down to that display board that I shared my work to, and there it is. And I can open it up in the big screen and play my game. Now, at the moment when I'm playing the game, it doesn't tell me exactly what I need to do. So if I hadn't created this code, I wouldn't know that I need to use my arrows. So I need to put some instructions into my code so that my friends can play it. What I'm going to do now is use this alert output option and drag it up to the top, and I'm going to write my instructions in my code so that when someone plays my game, they know which buttons to use and what to click on. So I'm back on my display board again now, and if I click on that code, you can see my instructions are there on that alert message. And off we go. I can play the game. So far in this webinar, we've had a look at free code scenes. Let's have a look now at free code chimp, where your children can get even more creative. In free code chimp, there are no scenes already set. You have these objects on the left-hand side that you can drag into your scene. But the first thing you need to do is set up your scene. And you can do that by clicking on the TV screen at the bottom left here, which gives you your property value box. You can then select the image for your background by clicking on that question mark. You can select one of our pre-made backgrounds. You can use your camera to take a photograph, which will become your background. You can paint your own background, or you could choose a file that you may have already saved away onto your computer. I'm going to select one of these built-in backgrounds. Now let's choose some objects to go in my forest scene. Now I'm studying traditional tales in school, so I'm going to have Little Red Riding Hood and a wolf. First of all, I'm going to start with a character. So I'm going to drag this character onto the scene. Now I don't necessarily want a pirate. I can double click on her on the scene, or I can click in this image value in the property value box. And I can go up here to the coding fairy tales, and there's Little Red Riding Hood. If I didn't know which category she was in, I could use my search magnifying glass here and type in Little Red. There we go. Now I need a wolf. I might start with an animal. If I drop the animal into my scene, I can double click on the dog there, and I can find a wolf. There we go. Now he's a bit small. I might make him a little bit bigger and called him Wolf. So I want to set this as a task for my class to complete the coding. They're going to plan the story with the partner, and then they're going to code it using the events, the controls, the output, and the objects that we've been learning through the guided lessons. In order to set this as a task for my class to complete independently, I'm going to use the menu here and click the share button. Now it will ask me to save this first, so I'm going to save it in my private folder. Now I've given it a file name and click save. Now because I use the shared globe icon, it will give me the sharing options. If I'm logged in as a teacher, I'll have this one here set as a to-do. So let's go through and set this as a to-do for my class. So I've given it a title, a description. I could add audio instructions to that if I wanted, and then click the next button. Now I'm going to tag it to the National Curriculum Objectives from Computing. So let me select Year 2, Subject, Computing, down to the Computer Science Objectives, and I'm going to tag these 3 objectives. Let's click OK. The reason I'm tagging these objectives now when I'm setting the to-do is that when the children complete the work, I can then assign teacher judgments based on how well the children have achieved with this activity. That's now been set. So let's come out of here and have a look at my to-dos. Let's go up to my to-do page and down to my Little Red Riding Hood code, and I can preview the work. There it is. Click on my design. There's my scene that I've already set with my 2 objects. Now I'm going to impersonate a child and actually complete that code task so that you can see how you can add teacher judgments to the work that's been completed. So I'm going to use my drop-down menu underneath my avatar at the top here, go down to this impersonate pupil login feature here, and I set this particular task for class 2, so I'm going to pretend to be Amelia McGuinness in class 2. Here we have Amelia's home page, and if I click on her alerts quickly, you'll see there is the to-do that I've just set for her, and she could go to that to-do using the alerts, or she could click the to-dos tick at the top here and go down to her active to-dos page, click the start button. So the scene has been set for her. She can drag other objects onto the scene if she wants to. She could even add buttons on there. So there we go. I've now got a button on my screen, which is going to make the woodcutter appear. Let's exit the design. I'm now in my code window where I get to program my objects to do things. First of all, I'm going to make Little Red Riding Hood speak to the wolf. Let's drag my sound here into this click event. Click on the question mark, and I'm going to use my microphone to record myself as Little Red Riding Hood. Let's play that and see what happens. Hi, I'm looking for my grandma's house. Can you help me? I'm going to save my coding now. Because I'm impersonating a pupil, you'll see that it saves with the child's name as the file name. Let's go back to the to-dos page. Amelia now has two options. She can continue working or she can hand in her work. If she hands in her work, she can leave us a message for the teacher and click OK. That will now come off her active to-dos page and go onto her done to-dos page, and there it is. And if I go back to being the teacher, use my drop-down menu underneath here, go back to being the teacher, I will be able to mark that work. I can either go to that piece of work to mark it via my alerts, or I can go via my to-dos page, click on the to-dos, go down to the to-do that I want to mark, click the View Folder button, and I can mark Amelia's piece of work there by clicking the Mark button. That will enable me to preview Amelia's work on the left-hand side, and I can see her code and play her code as well. I can add some comments here. I can add a voice comment using my microphone. I can also give her a reward for fantastic work. Click on this button here. I can submit a reward for Amelia. I can also add teacher judgments to this piece of work. So if I click on this judgments area here are the 3 objectives that I tagged initially when I set this task as a to-do for the children to complete independently. So I think Amelia is actually exceeding on all of those areas there. Let's click exceeding and click the save button. Now let's come out of here and go back to my data dashboard area, which is this one up here. Go down to the judgments area, down to computing, down to year 2. Let's have a look at computer science. There I can see the teacher judgments that I've assigned to Amelia McGuinness's piece of work. In this webinar, we have explored the open-ended free code mode within 2Code, where children can explore, design, and create their own programs. If you would like to dive deeper into any aspect of teaching coding to your pupils, you can use the training platform course on coding, which is in the Teachers area under the Professional Development tab. In this course, you can watch short how-to videos, be able to explore the coding tools in Purple Mash, and take short quizzes to test your knowledge at the end.